All right, so in the episode of the Sirens, Odysseus and his men just left the underworld, and we have a little recap here before the episode of the Sirens begins. So last time on the Odyssey, it says Odysseus returns to Circe's island after he visited the underworld, and so the goddess reveals his course to him and gives him advice on how to avoid the dangers he will face, which are going to be the Sirens who lure sailors to their destruction. She warns him of the wandering rocks, which are sea rocks that destroy even birds in flight. She warns him of the perils of the sea monster Scylla, and nearby the whirlpool Charybdis, and the cattle of the sun god, which Tiresias has warned Odysseus not to harm. So first they're going to encounter the Sirens, who are the women with bird-like bodies and beautiful faces of women with also beautiful voices that lure men into their deaths. And then Circe also warns Odysseus of Scylla and Charybdis. So Scylla is a six-headed monster that eats men as they pass by. And she works in conjunction with a giant whirlpool, which is like a maelstrom, called Charybdis. And so while the men usually, this is how they work as a team, while Charybdis is making her whirlpool and her little geysers and spumes, Scylla makes her strike, because the men are so distracted at the thought of going in the whirlpool and the giant hole in the ocean that Scylla can just whisk them away. So Scylla, again, is a six-headed monster. Charybdis is a monster that lives at the bottom of the ocean that creates a whirlpool. And so when the men go down the whirlpool, she ends up eating them at the bottom. So I like to think of it like a giant Venus flytrap at the bottom of the ocean that causes a whirlpool around the water. And so Circe actually tells Odysseus that he needs to avoid Charybdis, this whirlpool, because if he gets caught in the stream of her water, there will be no escaping. They'll go down into the whirlpool and into Charybdis's mouth. And so she actually recommends that Odysseus and his men stay off to the side, and they're going to have to be closer to Scylla, which means Odysseus knows that 6 of his men will probably get eaten by Scylla because she is a six-headed monster. Okay, so Circe recommends that they stay closer to Scylla in order to avoid the current that goes into Charybdis. All right, but first they're going to encounter the Sirens, so let's start with that. As Circe spoke, Dawn mounted her golden throne. And on the first rays, Circe left me, taking her way like a great goddess up the island. I made straight for the ship, roused up the men to get aboard and cast off at the stern. They scrambled to their places by the rowlocks, and all in line dipped oars in the gray sea. But soon an offshore breeze blew to our liking, a canvas-bellying breeze, a lusty shipmate sent by the singing nymph with sunbright hair. So we made fast the braces, and we rested, letting the wind and steersman work the ship. The crew being now silent before me, I addressed them sore at heart. So again, here's an epic hero trait of leadership, because Odysseus, he's so good at pep talks. All right, remember from yesterday, the Cyclops, he gave him a pep talk, a battle talk. Here's another one. Dear friends, more than one man or two should know those things. Circe foresaw for us and shared with me. So let me tell her forecast, then we die with our eyes open if we are going to die, or know what death we baffle if we can. Sirens, weaving a haunting song over the sea, we are to shun, she said, in their green shore all sweet with clover, yet she urged that I alone should listen to their song. Therefore you are to tie me up, tight as a splint, erect along the mast, lashed to the mast, and if I shout and beg to be untied, take more turns of the rope to muffle me. So Odysseus has requested that his crew tie him to the mast of the ship, which is like the giant pole on the ship that holds the sails. Yes. Yes, this would be the epic hero trait of leadership. It would also be loyalty to crew, because what I was going to get at next is, if you think about the imagery of Odysseus being tied to the mast of a ship, what does it look like? Like, yeah, Jesus being tied to the cross. And so we're not, I'm not calling Odysseus Christ or Jesus, but what I'm saying is in literature and film, characters who do things like this are what we call Christ-like figures. And so that just means that he's acting like Christ. He's sacrificing himself for others. And so Odysseus is a Christ-like figure here. And yes, that is loyalty to crew. That is leadership. It is bravery. It is any of those things. And you could put that on your epic hero chart. All right, moving on. He says, I rather dwelt on this part of the forecast while our good ship made time, bound outward down the wind for the strange island of the Sirens. Then all at once the wind fell, and a calm came over all the sea, as though some power lulled the swell. The crew were on their feet briskly to furl the sail and stow it. Then each in place they poised the smooth oar blades and sent the white foam scudding by. I carved a massive cake of beeswax into bits and rolled them in my hands until they softened. No long task, for a burning heat came down from Helios, lord of high noon. Going forward, I carried wax along the line and laid it thick on their ears. All right, so what did he give his crewmates so they wouldn't hear the sirens? Yeah, beeswax. And it's kind of muggy outside. There's like a lot of like mist. All right, it's kind of eerie outside. And so he's like rubbing it in his hands to try to melt it, and then all of a sudden Helios sends down some sun to help melt it. So Helios is helping him out here. So yes, he does put beeswax in his crew's ears. They tied me up then plumb amidships, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, and took themselves again to rowing. Soon as we came smartly within hailing distance, the two Sirens, noting our fast ship off their point, made ready, and they sang, This way, O turn your bows, Achaea's glory, as all the world allows, more and be merry. Sweet coupled airs we sing, no lonely seafarer holds clear of entering our green mirror. Pleased by each purling note, like honey twining from her throat and my throat, who lies a pining. Sea rovers here take joy, voyaging onward from our song of Troy. Graybeard and rower boy goeth more learned. All feats on that great field in the long warfare. Dark days the bright gods willed, wounds you bore there. Argos' old soldiery, on Troy beach teeming, charmed out of time we see, no life on earth can be hid from our dreaming. The lovely voices in our door appealing over the water made me crave to listen, and I tried to say, untie me, to the crew, jerking my brows, but they bent steady to the oars. Then Paramedes got to his feet, he and Eurylochus, and passed more line about to hold me still. So all rowed on until the Sirens dropped under the sea rim, and their singing dwindled away. My faithful company rested on their oars now, peeling off the wax that I had laid thick on their ears, then set me free. So Odysseus begs to be untied, and then his crew, they don't listen to him. They actually listen to his instructions beforehand, and they get more rope, and they tie him more tightly when he asks to be untied. Yes? Yeah, you could argue superhuman strength as him trying to get out of the rope. Yeah. And they have to get more down to hold him down. Yeah. So then after they leave, we're going to move on to Scylla and Charybdis here. So after they leave the Sirens, like they literally just got out of the Sirens, and then they look ahead and they see faded blue air and they see some smoke, and then they see some currents going on in the water, and they're like, oh crap, what is that? And then they see Charybdis, the whirlpool, and they're like, oh my gosh. And of course the men are freaking out. Odysseus knows that he's about to lose 6 men to Scylla, because she's a 6-headed monster, so she'll whisk 6 of them away. And so he says, but scarcely had that island faded in blue air than I saw smoke and white water with sound of waves and tumult. A sound the men heard, and it terrified them. Oars flew from their hands, the blades went knocking wild alongside till the ship lost way, with no oar blades to drive her through the water. Well, I walked up and down from bow to stern, trying to put heart in them, standing over every oarsman, saying gently, again, here's leadership, here's his battle talk. Friends, have we never been in danger before this? More fearsome is it now than when the Cyclops pinned us in his cave? What power he had! Did I not keep my nerve and use my wits to find a way out for us? Now I say, by hook or crook, this peril too shall be something that we remember. Heads up, lads. We must obey the orders as I give them. Get the oar shafts in your hands and lay back hard on your benches. Hit these breaking seas. Zeus, help us pull away before we founder. You at the tiller, listen and take in all that I say. The rudders are your duty. Keep her out of the combers and the smoke. Steer for that headland. Watch the drift, or we fetch up in the smother and you drown us. That was all, and it brought them round to action. But as I sent them on to Scylla, I told them nothing, as they could do nothing. They would have dropped their oars again in panic, to roll for cover under the decking. Circe's bidding against arms had slipped my mind, so I tied up my cuirass and took up 2 heavy spears, then made my way along the foredeck, thinking to see her first from there, the monster of the gray rock, harboring torment for my friends. I strained my eyes upon the cliffside veiled in cloud, but nowhere could I catch sight of her. And all this time in travail, sobbing, gaining on the current, we rowed into the strait, Scylla to port, and on our starboard beam Charybdis, dire gorge of the salt sea tide. By heaven, when she vomited, all the sea was like a cauldron, seething over intense fire, when the mixture suddenly heaves and rises. The shot spume soared to the landside heights and fell like rain. But when she swallowed the seawater down, we saw the funnel of the maelstrom, heard the rock bellowing all around, and dark sand raged on the bottom far below. My men blanched against the gloom. Our eyes were fixed upon that yawning mouth in fear of being devoured. All right, so they're all staring at Charybdis, the whirlpool, not even thinking about this 6-headed monster that's about to snatch them up. And then Odysseus says, then Scylla made her strike, whisking 6 of my best men from the ship. I happened to glance aft at ship, and the oarsmen caught sight of their arms and legs dangling high overhead. Voices came down to me in anguish, calling my name for the last time. All right, here's a Homeric epic simile of what he's comparing the bodies wriggling in the air like. A man surf casting on a point of rock for bass or mackerel, whipping his long rod to drop the sinker and the bait far out, will hook a fish and rip it from the surface to dangle, wriggling through the air. So these were borne aloft in spasms towards the cliff. So what does he say his men's bodies were like? Yeah, fish, like out of water. So he compares Scylla to a fisherman whisking a fish out of water, and then the fish just like wriggling through the air, having spasms. It's pretty gory and, gross. She ate them as they shrieked there in her den, in the dire grapple, reaching still for me, and deathly pity ran me through at that sight, far the worst I ever suffered, questing the passage of the strange sea. We rowed on, the rocks were now behind, Charybdis too, and Scylla dropped astern. So Odysseus, again, he admits to us that that's the worst experience he's had on this whole journey back home, was having to watch 6 of his best men be whisked away like that and torn apart in Scylla's den and be eaten alive as they yell his name for help. Odysseus says, I was helpless. I couldn't do anything for them. And so here we have a hero who, again, is admitting that he was scared and he did not know what to do in that moment of his friends' deaths. And so next we'll pick up with the cattle of the sun god, where Odysseus and his men go to Lord Helios's cattle.